What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with a DFS preview for this week's Hero World Challenge. Only 20 players in the field. We didn't have golf last week, but we're back for what should be a solid ending to the year. I know it's not a full field, not 156 players. There's no cut this week, but we still have 20 of the very best players from around the world teeing it up. And sure, no Tiger Woods. He had to withdraw with plantar fasciitis, but still, we do have a solid top-end field. It's not like Tiger Woods was going to go out there and contend anyways. He'll still be there on property. We'll see him for the PNC Championship, but it's hard to choose when we have such top-end talent. I mean, there's guys in the 6K range that are normally 9K range golfers. I believe only like 5 or 6 guys there in the 8K plus range. Just a strange slate to break down. We'll talk about the top level perspective a little bit, but what we're going to focus on here are 3 of my top plays of the week. In fact, 3 players I've already bet outright, but in the DFS market specifically, players that I think are worth considering for your DFS contest this week. So a lot to get into. Let's go ahead and get it started with our key stats for analysis. I like to begin these videos with a look at my key stats to give you an idea of the types of metrics I'm using to identify my top plays. So when I'm spewing off random shots gained metrics, it makes sense why we're looking at the ones that we are, right? So we're on the same page there. First off, we've got shots gained approach. That is always going to be at number 1. But what we got to focus on here is the ordering of these buckets. There's a ton of those mid-iron shots from 150 to 175. I'd consider longer iron shots like 175 to 200, that 200 to 225 yard range are going to be used a little bit more this week than what you're used to seeing on tour. The 125 to 150 used a little bit less. That 50 to 125 yard range used a lot less than what you're used to seeing. So those are a few things to note from the approach bucket, but always looking at it, it's the most sticky stat for week to week. It's the most correlated to success of any stat out there on the PGA Tour, so it's always going to be there at number 1. But at number 2, perhaps the first surprise, birdie or better percentage. Now it's worth noting that the weighting over here is blacked out. If you do want access to them, they are on my Patreon page, under the spreadsheet, all that sort of fun stuff, as is a lot of the other information on the sheet that you're going to see blacked out later on. So if you're looking for the actual percentages that I'm using in my models, those are on there. But birdie or better percentage, the number 2 weighted stat. And that has to do with how easy, the solid scoring that you're going to find around Albany. Scoring average of better than 2.5 strokes under par. So to take it to 20, 25 under par, to go out there and be the champion, you're going to have to be capable of shooting a 7 or an 8 under par round. And there's plenty of consistent players on tour. I mean, cough, cough, Billy Horschel out there that are capable of shooting like a 3 or a 4 under par round, but aren't going nuclear like a Sam Burns, a Cam Young very often. So birdie or better percentage is a way to encapsulate just how aggressive that a player is. And though a lot of the higher birdie percentage players also bogey more holes, that's okay around a resort style track like what we have with Albany. Looking at putting, specifically on Bermuda grass, that is the grass of the week. Driving distance, this is a relatively long golf course. It's a 7,400 yard par 72 with 5 par 5s, a lot of dog legs, a lot of natural areas that you can carry and take out of play with driver. I talked extensively about that in my course breakdown video. There will be a link in the description of the video to that. So if you haven't already seen that, I would highly recommend checking it out. By far the most in-depth piece of content that I put out every single week, where I actually go hole by hole and show you where that driving distance can be useful. So definitely a stat I'm looking at. Par 5 scoring, another way to take a look at some of those bombers. Around the green is actually kind of important at this golf course. Now, it's not a top 3 stat or anything like that for me, but still something I'm considering because we do just have 4,500 square foot greens. Looking at shots gained at no cut events like what we have here. And lastly, comp courses, right? And I shouldn't say lastly, right? If anything, it's one of the more important stats that we have, but Congaree, great comp course. That's what we saw for the CJ Cup. Scottsdale has a lot of the same natural areas that you'll see around this track. Copperhead, a good ball striking comp. Vedanta Vallarta, another ball striking comp, relatively long golf course. Twin Cities, Sea Island, PGA West, all of those are solid comps as well that I have weighted in my model. Now that we've seen the key metrics, kind of know what I'm looking for, which is a bomber that is a high birdie percentage player and that can make putts on Bermuda grass. It shouldn't be a surprise. at all that my top 3 picks are a Scotty Scheffler, a Sam Burns, and a Cameron Young. All 3 of them elite level bombers, some of the longest players on tour. Approach play is just absurd for all 3 players. When they're firing on all cylinders, they are, top 5 approach players that we have here on the PGA Tour. And with the putting perspective, all 3 of them tend to be pretty solid on Bermuda grass. So we're going to go, one-on-one with all 3 of these players. But they're kind of all along that same vein, right? They fit that bomber narrative, and 2 out of the 3 that have actually played here before also have a solid track record around Albany. So it's not just, from the logic standpoint, the course fit perspective. In practice, they've also played well here. So it's worth noting on the ownership side that these are the earliest numbers that have ran all week. There are only 20 players in the field. Sepp Straka down here, I have a question mark next to his price tag. He, as of this moment, has still not been added to the player pool, but there will be 20 players, which means that your average ownership, right, across 20 players, right, 600% across your 6 spots in your DraftKings lineup is going to be 30%. So when you see a 30.8% here in Scotty Scheffler, don't look at it like you would a typical week. In fact, that's really low ownership up top. The chalk up here is going to be a Jon Rahm. He might be 50, maybe 50% plus owned in some contests. Sam Burns at 22% is actually among some of the lower owned plays in that range. And down here, Cam Young, 28.7%. Same kind of story, right? That's average in terms of his ownership, if anything. So make sure you keep that in mind. What I tried to do here is not only pick 3 guys that I think are good course fits that have played well here in those 2 cases, but are guys that are maybe a little bit overlooked, which is important for DFS, right? Trying to get low ownership, but you're also going to get better numbers on. And I want to start here with Scotty Scheffler, who has been ball striking the absolute hell out of it. So if you look at his last 16 rounds, you can see gaining over 3/4 of a stroke per round, or actually close to 3/4 of a stroke per round on approach, but almost a stroke per round off the tee. And over his last 50, right? So if you zoom in, he's obviously playing well, but you zoom out, he's still playing just as well, if not even better on approach, where he actually is over a stroke per round on approach, still 3/4 of a stroke per round off the tee. Just absurd stuff from Scotty. We've seen this for the last year at this point, so it's not just the last 50 measured rounds where he's been playing absurdly well from, the ball striking perspective, but the putter has been a problem for that same time, right? Losing 1/3 of a stroke per round over the last 16, losing close to half a stroke per round. When the putter turns around, you're going to have Scotty Scheffler. When he gets the putter rolling, and if he can get it rolling for like a month stretch, he's going to win like 4 events again. Like he's going to go on that same sort of run because he's the best ball striker in the field, right? Over the last 16 rounds. The only guy who can even sniff him would be a Jon Rahm, right? Who is technically better numbers, but these are being pulled from some Euro Tour events. So weaker fields, a lot easier to gain strokes to the field. So you got to look at it with a grain of salt. But in terms of guys that have just played on the PGA Tour and absolutely killed it, there's nobody even in the same realm of somebody like a Scotty Scheffler. So you like what you see from that perspective. And on Bermuda grass, he's a gainer for his career. And I've been banging this drum, right? At the CJ Cup, we were all over a Scotty Scheffler. But time before that, I think it was the Houston Open, right? Actually, time after that, Houston Open, Bermuda grass. We were all over him because you're just hoping that he can get back to that baseline, and he's continued to lose strokes putting. Now, he changed his putter 2 events ago. Didn't go well, ended up changing back to the traditional putter, still didn't go well. At some point, something's got to give, because when this guy was on his roll last year, he's done it in the past. It's not like it just happened during that roll. He gained a bunch of strokes putting, and in the past, he's been a pop putter that's gained 5 or 6 strokes putting. We're not even asking him to do that. If he can go out there this week, maybe just gain a stroke and a half, 2 strokes putting, again, like half a stroke per round or something like that, he's going to go out there and win this by 4 strokes. He's that sort of player from tee to green. He fits exactly what we're looking for, long and straight, a high birdie percentage player, and just everything except for the putter has been there of late. So Scotty's being overlooked because of the form. I mean, you take a look at the finishes, right? He still finished top 10 at the Houston Open, but that was disappointing for most people out there, considering that, Tony Finau ran away and won that golf tournament. 3rd place at Mayakoba. A lot of people don't even remember that. Top 45 at the CJ Cup. He should be mega chalk in everyone. And I mean, everyone out there is talking up Jon Rahm. So Jon Rahm's going to be like 50% owned. And if that's going to mean that Scotty's average in terms of his ownership, now he might go up to like 35, 40% by the end of the week. I'm still going to be on him. I'm still going to have to get there because he has just way higher upside than everyone else in this range. So I like Jon Rahm. I get the ownership. I was considering making him a core pick, but when we have to consider for DFS, where ownership is the name of the game for these large field contests, Scottie Scheffler is the guy that I'd rather have. Next up, we've got Sam Burns, who's another bomber, right? Great on Bermuda. And his last time out at Houston Open ended up withdrawing with 5 holes to go, losing with his worst ever putting performance. Lost over 6 strokes putting in the 31 holes that he played, which is something that's not going to happen again. We know that he's one of the better putters in the field in the world, actually, when it comes to his shots gained on Bermuda grass. And the ball striking numbers have still been there. I mean, you take a look at the approach play over his last 16, which again, really zooming in on that, hasn't been quite as well. But you go out to the last 50, you're seeing what you're looking for, right? Gaining close to half a stroke per round on approach, still gaining off the tee and the putter, right? Gaining close to 3/4 of a stroke per round. So he's been in a little bit of a slump, right? With the approach play particularly, but even with the putter, right? Only gaining close to 1/3 of a stroke per round, which is almost entirely due to what happened with the 6 strokes lost last time out, which dilutes a lot of the really good performances you've seen from him of late. He's going to be under-owned for all the guys that look at stats, and he's priced around a Tommy Fleetwood, who, if you're looking at shots gained metrics, looks like an absolute god, right? Gaining 1.5 shots per round on approach, nearly half a stroke off the tee. This is because it's pulling up Euro Tour stats. He went over there, he finished in the top 5, ended up winning an event his last time out, and gained, I believe it was over like 12 strokes in both of those events going in. So just, really good form if you believe in the Euro Tour stuff. But I'm one of the people that, I'm not trying to diss the Euro Tour over there, but it's kind of like the minor league tour. Or the triple A's when it comes to Major League Baseball, and there's just different levels of competition, right? So a win over there is probably like a top 5 on the PGA Tour. I look at those pretty similarly. So he's coming in with form, but I don't know if he should be like 40% chalk, like I have him projected at right now. Whereas Sam Burns, half his owned, is a better course fit, better off the tee, more stout, more consistent off the tee player. Their approach games are, similar right now, let alone from the long-term perspective, where Sam Burns is a much better iron player. I mean, let's zoom out, right? Let's go to the last 50 rounds. You start to see equalize rate. It's starting to come back to earth, right? 0.7 shots per round. Again, a lot of those still coming from the Euro Tour. Sam Burns, one of the best iron players that we have on the PGA Tour. And when you consider the course history, right? I meant to mention this with Scotty too, right? He finished in second last year, right? Runner-up. I mean, look at this. Sam Burns, 3rd place last year, right? Finished in the top 3. I don't think a lot of people are going to consider that. And sure, it's a 1 event sample size, 1 year sample size in a 20-person event, right? So there's going to be a lot of volatility there. I'd rather see a top 3 finish than something there like 15th or something like that in his first try. So I like the course fit. I like the history here. I like the ownership, kind of like a Scottie Scheffler up top, which makes both of them especially solid plays in my opinion. And the last guy we're going to talk about here is Cameron Young at $6,700. A bomber. Now his form has been a little bit more shoddy. He's kind of been like a Scottie Scheffler, where the putter has just been absolutely cold, gaining a bunch of strokes off the tee, a bunch with the approach play, and with the putter, losing just over 2/3 of a stroke per round, which is just, that can't continue. We know that he's an inconsistent putter, but still somebody that should gain in the long run when it comes to the putting. And when you zoom out on it, it's still kind of like that. It's why he was in a little bit of a slump to end the year. You can see Cam Young here gaining close to a stroke per round off the tee, still a stud on approach, but losing close to a little bit over 2/10 of a stroke per round. So Cameron Young, he's got to turn it around with the putter, but if there's one thing we know about him, is that putter can turn around in a hurry. In the past, we've seen him lose 4 or 5 strokes on the greens, go out there the next week and gain 4 or 5 strokes on the greens. So he's got that bounce back in him. No course history because it's his first year here. The recent form has been a little bit shoddy too, so that's why I think it's going to keep the ownership down, right? 2 no-cut events, 23rd, okay, that's fine, but 53rd at a no-cut event is certainly not that great. So you do worry about the form here a little bit, but if that's going to keep him at just 28.7%, which is pretty much right about, Max Homa's ownership right now, somebody who, just had a kid, hasn't been playing that much, lower owned than a Tom Kim, lower owned certainly than a Colin Morikawa, and that same sort of range as a Shane Lowry. I mean, Cameron Young could easily win this golf tournament. He's got the length we need. He's got the spike putter that we're looking for. And I mean, the iron play has just been outrageously good of late, right? he's got to get that flat stick to turn around. So that's kind of the MO with all three of them. We know that Sam Burns was horrible with the putter. Scotty Scheffler's been horrible with the putter for quite some time. And Cameron Young, same sort of story. If any of the three end up doing so, they're winning this week, right? So that's why I've bet them outright. That's why I think they're great DFS plays. But even if they don't, even if they're just a neutral, right? That's probably a top 5 in this field. Again, it's just a 20-player field. It's probably a top 3 in this field, to be quite honest with you, if they're able to get to a neutral putter. And from the DFS perspective, for a $7,200 golfer, that's fine. $6,700 golfer, that's probably fine. Even in the 10K range, unless one of these guys wins, that's probably fine too, right? So, a lot of people look at it as like, oh, win or bust in this sort of field. It's not really the case with the 7K golfers at all, right? You're just looking for a solid floor, right? A top 5 finish. It's kind of what you're looking for with these 6 and 7K golfers. And even without the spike putter, they can get there, let alone if they end up breaking the slate with their putter, which is also well within their range of outcomes. All right, fellas, that is all I've got for this week's DFS breakdown. Before you hop on out of here, go ahead and smash that like button. Also, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the content in the future. We will be doing a live stream Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern time, going through the slate, the last-second weather concerns, which there won't be any sort of weather advantage, but maybe it changes our modeling if it's going to play a little bit more difficult. We'll touch on that, DFS strategy, the last-second ownership, which will be the most up-to-date going into lock, any of your live questions, just everything you need to know heading into this weekend and to get you prepared to make the best lineups. So we'll be doing that Wednesday again at 7 p.m. Eastern time. So until then, guys, best of luck. If you go with the outright perspective, best of luck with all of your outrights. But let's go ahead and get this cash this week and go ahead and end this year strong.